everybody. My name is Terry. I'm one of the pastors here, and if it's your first time, thanks so much. Thanks for being a part of our church today, and we're continuing a message series entitled Tribes, and what we've been talking about is this idea that the Christian life was never meant to be lived alone, that we were to live it within the context of community. And today I'm excited because we're going to walk through our anchor passage today. And if you're new to our church, we've been anchoring this whole series around one passage. It's a famous passage of Scripture. It's on the Great Commission, and where Jesus kind of shares with us our responsibilities if we're a follower of Jesus. And I want to say this, if you're not a Christian in this room, I'm excited for you for this reason, watching online in the balcony or on the floor, is because we've done a terrible job as Christians. I'm just going to say it. Over the years, we've had many different methods and different things, and many times we have offended or we have behaved in such a way to where if you're not a Christian, you've been interested in the things of God, and maybe you've come to church, or maybe you've talked with someone, and maybe we've said something a wrong way or done something in a way where you're like, oh my gosh, I don't feel right about that. And it actually has maybe pushed you away from wanting to know more about God than actually inviting you in to know more about God. I'm going to explain in just a second. But if you're not a Christian, I want you to lean in, because I believe actually Jesus gives us the exact way and method in which we are supposed to tell others about what it means to follow him and to live a life that honors him. And so if you're not a Christian, just lean in and listen up. And if you are a Christian in the room, then I pray that you receive this and we look at it and we learn together, because it's really simple. It actually is a simple method that many times we as Christians, we kind of mess up from time to time. And in order to do that in the right way, we're going to start with this anchor passage. So let's go to Matthew 28:18, and this is what Jesus says. This is the command that we're to follow. Jesus came and told his disciples, I have been given all authority in heaven and on earth. Therefore, go. Go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Teach these new disciples to obey all the commands I've given you. And be sure of this, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. That is the command of Jesus. And where we get tripped up as Christians and where we many times have messed this process up is that we see that those words, go and make disciples. And many of us think that we are to go and we are going to make someone a follower of Jesus, that we actually have the power to go and to force someone into being interested in Jesus. And the truth is we don't have that power. Only the power of God can change a heart. We've learned this. And what did we say in the last few weeks about what it means to go and make disciples? We've said that we're to live our lives in such a way where it's to inspire others to become a learner about who Jesus is. That's what go make disciples actually means. So when we read it in that way, we begin to understand, if that's the way we go and make disciples, maybe I've not approached it the way that I should have approached it. Case in point, because I've messed up. I've done it horribly in the past. Right intentions, wrong method. Many years ago, a guy by the name of Rick Warren, very famous pastor, came out with a book called The Purpose-Driven Life. Sold #1 bestseller, millions and millions and millions. Amazing book. Highly recommend to anybody who is interested in a relationship with God, or maybe you've never read it. Highly recommend that book. It really, really simplifies and clarifies what following Jesus actually looks like. So he came out with that book. Our church got really excited about it and great intentions and said, hey, we want all of us as leaders to go out into our communities, into our neighborhoods, and we want to encourage you to do a book study. We want to encourage you to take and invite your neighbors to come over and to learn about this resource, because maybe it'll help them learn more about Jesus. And so I was excited. I'm like, yes, I'm going to go home. I've got neighbors. I'm going to check it off the list. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to invite them. They're going to come. I'm going to open this book up. God's going to do his thing, and it's going to be awesome. But there's a problem with that, because going and making disciples is about inspiring others to want to learn about Jesus. I forgot that whole word about inspire. So what I did was I took that resource, I went home, and I told my lovely wife, Jennifer, I said, this is awesome. We're going to open our home. We're going to have our neighbors over, and we're going to go ahead and invite specific neighbors. She goes, well, which neighbors are we going to invite? I said, and I'm going to call him Fred. We're going to invite Fred, our next door neighbor. And so Jennifer looked at me, and she goes, you don't even know Fred. And I said, I know, but I wave at him. And by the way, if you live in South Florida, it's known as the dash and the wave. See, here in the South, when you pull up to your house, you're expected to spend, if neighbor's outside, you say hello and you actually talk to them and you actually ask them about their day and their week and their life. You better hold for about 20 to 25 minutes or you're considered rude. By the way, if you're just moving into town, that's why people are looking at you funny if you don't spend that time. When I lived in South Florida, it was expected, you don't waste people's time. We got places to go and people to see. And so when you get there, you look at your neighbor and you wave at them and you keep walking to your house. You don't know your neighbors. You kind of go into your docile, okay? That's what it is. So Fred was like that. When I would go home, I would do the wave and the dash. He would do the wave. He wouldn't even like look at me or smile at me. That was okay. That was commonplace. So Jennifer goes, you're going to invite Fred? I mean, you really don't know much about him or anything? I said, yes, it's going to be great. She goes, all right. And she goes, how are you going to do this? How are you going to get him to be a part of this club when you don't even know him? I'm going to trick him. She goes, what do you mean you're going to trick him? He needs to know who Jesus is, so here's what we're going to do. It's a great book. I know it'll be great for him. I know he's going to love it. So I've got to figure out a way to get him into our home so that I can get this book to him. And she says, well, how are you going to trick him? I said, well, I'm going to go. I know he likes to read. He's mentioned before in passing that he liked to read. I said, I'm going to invite him to a book study, but I'm not going to tell him what book we're going to read. And she goes, don't you think that's going to backfire? And you're like, no, it's going to be great. It's going to be great. It's going to be great. So sure enough, I get the books, and I walk over to my neighbor's house, Fred, and I knock on his door. He opens the door. He seems a little bit like what are you doing here? Because I've never been to his door before. He only lives like about 20 feet kind of down the road, by the way, so condemns me. So I go ahead and I said, hey, Fred, how are you? And he's like, great. And I said, hey, next Tuesday, my wife and I are opening our home. We're going to have dinner, and we're going to invite some neighbors, and we'd like to invite you to be a part of a book club. We're going to study a book and, just have time connecting as neighbors, and we'd love for you to be a part. He said, well, I like to read. That sounds great. So then so in my mind, I heard, that sounds great. That's all I needed to hear. I'm like, yes, all right. So then he goes, well, what book are we going to be? You know what? I have a copy right here for you. And he said, oh, great. What's it about? I'll leave it with you. I'll see you Tuesday. I got to run. And he says, oh, well, thank you very much. Okay. And he says, I guess I'll see you Tuesday. Great. Awesome. He shuts the door. I go into my house like, yes, got him. He's coming over. It's going to be great. And she goes, does he know what book we're reading? Does he know anything about it? I'm like, no. And she goes, don't you think this is going to be a little awkward for him? Because, again, I don't know if he actually believes the things that you believe. And I go, it's going to be fine. Sure. It'll be great. Tuesday comes. Knock on the door early, like 4 o'clock. We're not supposed to start till 6. I open the door, and there's Fred standing there. And he has the book in his hand. And I'm like, Fred, you're early. And he goes, Terry, and he tosses the book at me. I catch the book. He said, I'm not interested in this stuff. Thank you very much. And he walked away. So the door closes. I walk by my wife. She gives me that look. I go, not right now. Because I need to self-loathe. I need to blame everybody but myself. So in that moment, I'm like, how dare he? I bought the book for him. I mean, I walked over. I initiated contact. I invited him into my home, and he throws the book back at me? What kind of Fine. You don't want to go to heaven? You want to go to hell? Fine. So be it. You do that. And then there's this thing called, if you're not a Christian, just listen up, because, that's not really what's going to happen and not the way that God sees it. In fact, God convicted me and says, did you really do the right thing there? Do you actually care about him? Do you actually know anything about him? I was like, well, no. And he goes, maybe if you were actually a neighbor and you loved your neighbor as yourself, you would actually get to know his story before you trick him. I was like, oh, fine. So I went back to my wife and I told her, well, I said, he was more wrong than me, but I'll admit I probably didn't approach it the right way, so here's what I'm going to do. I feel bad. I need to apologize. And she said, I think that'd be good. And I said, you don't have to say that, okay? So I went ahead, and the next day as I was coming home, he was out in the parking lot, and I walked up to him, and I said, hey, Fred, I said, I just wanted to apologize. I said, honestly, I said, I shouldn't have just, assumed, and I said, I apologize. I just really would love to get to know you as my neighbor, and I said, so again, forgive me. And he said, Terry, no problem. I say that because that is an example that many Christians over the years have thought that go and make disciples actually means. That we are to go and we just have to check it off our list. We just need to tell people about Jesus. And we think that's what we should do. And there's a principle here, and I want to bring it to and help those of us that are in relationships. There is this principle of active listening versus fixing, okay? And I want to bring this up. And I want to apologize to all the guys who are fixers in the room because I'm going to out you right now. Because here's what happens. Many times we go into communicating with another individual, and there are some of us that we actually really are not interested in the things that they say. We actually are fixers. We actually have a plan and a process. And when they say something, if we figured out how to fix it, then we don't need any more words. Then we're just there, we're just listening, and we're just waiting for you to finish talking so we can show you our wisdom and our intellect and impress you with all those things. And what I would say is the problem is that individuals are not problems to be fixed. They're people to be loved. And that's where we go wrong. When we truly love our neighbors, we actually think more about the person than a plan. When we invest in people, they'll see God working through us and will be inspired to know more about His plan for their lives. And what we say is we're to go make disciples. We're to inspire others to learn more about who Jesus is. So now with that being said, if you feel a little bit like you've messed up in the past and you've done this wrong, if you're not a Christian and you feel like, yep, that's happened to me and that's what's caused me not to necessarily want to know God because of the way that people have kind of treated me, then great. Because here's what we're going to do. We're going to teach you what Jesus actually meant and He illustrated with His disciples. So let me kind of fill you in. Let's go into some teaching time, okay? So there is a place. Let me give you some context where we're going here because Jesus Christ is going to have an interaction with His disciples. And so, by the way, when I say disciples, all of us in this church, if you're a believer in Jesus Christ, you're a follower of Jesus. You're a disciple. You are inspired to want to know more about Him. So replace yourself with the disciples when we teach on it, okay? So here's what happens. Jesus has been teaching all over the place, and He's in an area known as Samaria. Now, contextually, Samaria is the northern part of Israel. And back way in history, the northern part of history of Israel, they didn't follow what God really wanted at the time. They went ahead and they said, you know what, we're going to go ahead and we're going to marry other people. We're not going to marry our Jewish brothers and sisters. You know what, we're not going to necessarily believe in our God. We're going to believe in their gods and other gods. We're going to set up different idols and we're going to worship in a different way. So the northern kingdom, the northern part, became known as Samaria, and Samaritans were despised by the Jewish people. In fact, there was nobody worse than a Samaritan or a tax collector. I'm just saying, okay? So here's what happens. Jesus is hanging out in the northern area, and He's got His disciples with Him, and here's what the disciples were thinking. This is the context. They're like, why are we in this place? I mean, these people, they abandoned our people. Like, why do we even care about them? I mean, they've got idols. They worship other people. I mean, Jesus, why are we here? That's offensive to God. We should not care about these people. They don't think like us. They don't act like us. They don't believe like us. So why should we care about them? And then Jesus looks at them and He sees their hearts. And then He has an interaction with someone that says, what does it mean to be a follower of Jesus? And Jesus says to him, it costs you everything. It costs you your family. Now, I don't have time to explain that today, but here's what Jesus meant. It means that your relationship with God and His commands for your life are primary, and you're to filter your life through those. That nothing comes before His teaching and what He desires in your life. Not your mother, not your father, not your brother. You don't put God's teaching on the side and follow your brother, your mother. He's primary. That's what Jesus was talking about. Now, it's important for you to remember that because He's setting the disciples up. Because then what happens is then they move and they're walking along, and they go back to the southern area and they're in a safe place, and He sees their hearts and they're like, oh, good, we're glad we're out of that place. We don't need to go back there. Samaria is terrible. And then all of a sudden, Jesus is going to say, okay, time for you to take all the teaching I've given you. Remember I said nothing comes before the teaching? Everything I've poured into you, here's what I want you to do. 72 of you, I'm going to send you out 2 by 2. And they're all there. They're kind of nervous. They're excited. And I'm sure they're thinking, where's our assignment? Which way are we going? And He looks at a lot of them and He goes, all right, you're going to go north. Samaria? Why are you sending us there? We don't like those people. And then Jesus is about to send them out, and He gives them some specific commands. So pay really close attention to what He says to the 72. This is Luke chapter 10, verse 2. It says this, "These were his instructions to them. The harvest is great, but the workers are few. So pray to the Lord who is in charge of the harvest. Ask him to send more workers into his fields." First thing he says is, hey, you all think the problem is with the people you're about to go to. That's not the problem. The problem is your hearts. The problem is the workers. The problem is understanding that you are to have my heart and you are to filter all of your feelings, emotions through what I teach you. And then you're to go out and you're to reach them. What Jesus was really saying is, look, I know they don't act like you. I know they don't believe like you. I know that you despise them and you think that they are not worth saving. But that's not what my Father's doing. You see, what you don't know is my Father is sending me to the cross to die for those people. And what my Father wants is for you to make sure that those people understand my sacrifice, so that maybe those people might actually come to learn and be a disciple of me. That's what I'm doing. So he says, the workers are few. So here's what it means. It means there's a whole lot of us that claim to be followers of Jesus and a whole lot of us who don't want to go inspire others to Jesus. Ouch. That hurts. So then he doubles down. Watch this. Continue on in the verse. He goes this. He says, "Now go and remember that I'm sending you out as lambs among the wolves." I love this. I love the humanity in this, because watch what Jesus does. He knows the hearts of the disciples, and they're like, oh gosh, I've got to go to Samaria. Oh, I don't want to go there. And so I think, I got to figure in Terry's paraphrase version of the Bible, that the disciples are sitting there having side conversations, and what some of them are saying is, all right, fine, we'll go. I don't know what Jesus is doing, but we'll go. And we're going to get laughed at. Bad things are going to happen to us, and then we're going to come back, and we're going to tell them about all these bad things, and we're going to show Jesus that it was a big mistake. We're going to show him it was a waste of time. We'll show him. And so Jesus, knowing the heart, he says, now I want to remind you that I'm sending you out as lambs among the wolves. In other words, Jesus said, look, it's going to be uncomfortable at times when you go. It's going to be awkward. It's going to be hard for you to make new relationships. In fact, you're going to be rejected and turned down. You're going to be ignored. But you know what? I don't care, because you have to fight. You have to fight to be able to make sure that you love them the way that I want them to be loved. Now, if I was that disciple, I'd be like, dang it, he got me again. Man, I thought I had him, and now, oh, fine. So we continue the story, and now watch. They're like, fine, Jesus, we'll go to Samaria, we'll go out, we'll actually tell you what do we need to do. Get practical here. So watch what Jesus says. Now here, I don't want you to take any money with you. I don't want you to take a bag or an extra pair of sandals. Now pause. How many of you on the floor, watching online, or in the balcony, if I told you we were going on a 2-week vacation, you're bringing 4 suitcases? I see some husbands elbowing their wives, and they're like, totally are. Now me, it's a carry-on, but I digress. But it's true, right? It's like, how am I supposed to do that? What do you mean I'm not supposed to bring anything? What do you mean? And he says, and by the way, don't stop and greet anybody on the side of the road. All right, Terry, what does this mean? Here's what it means. Look, I know you don't want to talk to these people. I know you don't even want a relationship with these people, so I'm not going to make it easy for you. So here's the thing. If you want to eat, if you want to sleep, if you want to drink, you're going to have to talk to those people. You're actually going to have to get to know them. You're actually going to have to invest in a relationship with them. So, sorry, I am going to really, really impress upon you and teach you the importance of relationship with those that don't believe like you, talk like you, or act like you. They are important too, and you need to figure out a way to make a disciple. So don't bring anything with you. Oh, in other words, don't miss this. Jesus said to them, don't try to win them like a trophy. A person is not a trophy to be won, but a friend to be made. Don't treat them like an object. You treat them like a heart. God created them in the womb. Whether they look like you, act like you, talk like you, it doesn't matter, because you should care about that heart. So he continues on in Luke 10:2-7. Whenever you enter someone's home, first say this, may God's peace be on this house. Now I love this, watch this. Peace has 2 meanings here. This is important. If you're not a Christian, lean in here for a second. Peace means when you enter into the home, may God's peace be upon you in this present time. How many of you right now, if you were to say, Terry, the best thing that I could hope for today is I need God's peace. I am going through a lot, and I would just love the peace of God right now. There are so many of us that we covet the peace of God in our daily life, depending on the week that we're having. So Jesus says, now go in and basically pray God's peace on that home. But here's the second thing that peace means. Peace also means not peace in the present, but peace for eternity. Do you understand what Jesus was doing? He was saying, when you go, pray God's peace, that his peace for the present and eternity is received with the people that you are investing with. And then it's great because you're like, oh, so as we build relationship, we inspire them to want to know you. And then if they see our relationship and listen to our teaching, maybe they want the same peace that we have. Yes. But now watch what happens. Some of us who maybe we don't like necessarily talking to people, maybe we're a little bit more introverted by nature, and we just, you know what, I leave that to the pastors because you guys like hearing yourself talk. Guilty. So we'll leave that up to you guys. And so you're fearful. Like, that's not me. Well, let me make it easy for you, okay? Because here's where we've confused it as followers of Jesus. We think that by what we say and what we do determines the course of their life. You're not that important. Only God can change and direct a heart. We can't. Now, he uses us to introduce people to who Jesus is. We're going to talk more about that. But the actual heart condition of an individual, look, God changed the path of many individual life. He looked at Saul in the New Testament, and he didn't like the way Saul was going, and he said, you know what, I've used a lot of people to talk to you, and you're not listening, so smack, I'm going to blind you, and then I'm going to cause you to know who I am. So if God wanted someone to know who he is in the moment, he could do it. So the heart is up to God. Our responsibility is to be obedient. So watch what happens. All right, Terry, I don't know if I can do this. Continuing on. If those who live there are peaceful, meaning if those who live there are open to learning and to growing and to, yeah, I'd like to know more about God, then watch what happens. The blessing will stand. But if they are not, then the blessing will return to you. In other words, whether it stays or not is not what you're concerned about. That's up to me. Your responsibility is to go, inspire, love, encourage, agree to disagree, but care about the heart. So he continues. He said, look, don't move around from home to home. Stay in one place. In other words, even if you don't like them, even if they smell, even if they, are not necessarily like you, you know what? Build a relationship. Stay in one place, eating and drinking as they provide. Don't hesitate to accept hospitality because those who work deserve their pay. And so Jesus was all encouraging them to want to encourage them to build relationships. Now, let's get practical. Because some of us are like, all right, Terry, we got it. Jesus wants us to inspire others to know him. How do I do that practically? Really quickly, I'm going to give you 3 very simple words that you can remember and that we're to apply to our lives so that when we go out into our neighborhoods and our communities, we can be an inspiration, hopefully, to others to want to know who Jesus is. So here's the first word. The first word is we have to learn to introduce. Learn to introduce ourselves. And the only way that we can introduce ourselves is if we have room for one more person in our life. I've said it many times. Too many of us are us 4 and no more. Too many of us, girls' night, Friday night, us 4, we've got our posse, this is awesome. Yes, I used the word posse, it was from the 1980s, you don't judge. But we've got our tribe and we're excited, we don't need any more people. That kind of focus is what gets us in trouble. Because what we've done is we've closed our heart off from the Great Commission. And so some of you are like, Terry, got it. I'm going to go and I'm going to tell people about Jesus. The problem is, and here's a question I would ask you, are you more interested in listening to their story or telling yours? Do you actually understand that inspiring to someone to know Jesus actually begins with building a relationship and actually wanting to hear their story? Wouldn't it be amazing if all the people who didn't know Jesus, if you're a skeptic or if you're not a Christian, wouldn't it be awesome if someone actually came up to you and said, hey, tell me your name. Just tell me your story. I'd love to hear more about you. Where it's not just all about us Christians. It's kind of like the husband who's just like, yeah, hurry up, get your words out so I can tell you exactly how to fix it. No. I actually care about your name. So are you more interested in learning than teaching? And then I love this because I've said this before, but so many of us, we go and we're so excited to tell someone about Jesus, and we're telling them, and we're talking about our story and everything else. And then I have a question for you. After 15 minutes of talking to the person, do you remember their name? How many of us talk and we're like, ooh, I don't remember their name. That's not that important. What's one thing that's unique about them? So when you introduce yourself to a neighbor or a friend or a coworker, you're actually saying, I care about your story more than I care about telling you mine. And when someone feels that they're valued and someone feels that they're important and someone feels that you actually care about them, then they might actually be willing to open their hearts up and make room for you. So the first thing that we have to do as followers of Jesus, we have to learn to introduce ourselves. Here's the second thing. We have to learn to invest. There are 3 levels of investment. I'm going to walk through it quickly. So we have to then, once we make the introduction and once we connect with someone, then we have to learn to be able to take it to the next level. So maybe level 1, investment. Maybe what we do is we bring over a small gift, maybe some pumpkin bread. Just saying. By the way, it was 62 this morning, and I realized why I like coffee. And last night I had some pumpkin bread. It smells so good. It tastes so good. And so maybe what you do is that if you are building a relationship with someone, just bring them over a gift and say, you know, I was thinking about you. Just wanted to bring this gift. Not for any other purpose other than to say, I care about you. So if you want to be my friend, feel free to bring me all the pumpkin bread you want because I'll eat it. So bring a small gift. There's a level 2. So the level 1 is maybe you start with a gift. Level 2 is maybe you invite them to a gathering. Maybe you're going out for coffee. Maybe you're having a gathering at your home. Whatever it is. Hey, if you want to pop by, it's a social gathering, just pop on by. You know, not getting too deep or anything else. We'd just love to let you know that I'm welcoming you into my tribe. I would love for you to be a part of my tribe. It's not us 4 would love to do it. And then level 3 is maybe then you go one-on-one and maybe you have dinner or maybe you invite them to a restaurant to say, you know, I really like you and would love to be able to get to know your story. Now, here's the thing. Many of us in this room, don't fall asleep. This is important. Many of us think that the people that we're supposed to do this with are the people who think like us and act like us and talk like us. Because isn't that what we do? We make friendships with people who are like us. But here's the problem. Jesus said, go to Samaria. Don't miss this. Go to Samaria. So how many of you have individuals within your friend network that don't think like you, don't talk like you, and don't act like you? How many of you have friends that you have to agree to disagree with on a lot of occasions? Do you want to know what it really means to go make disciples? Have a friend like that. Because there's tension. There's frustration. But you know what? Some of my best relationships are with individuals who don't think like me, act like me, or talk like me. Because they challenge me. And I like the challenge. And we have great conversations. Doesn't mean you have to change what you believe. It just means you agree to disagree, but you continue to love them even despite their unbelief. Maybe that's what Jesus did with us. Just saying. So we have to introduce. We have to invest. And the third one is really simple. We need to learn to invite. Maybe if you get to a point of investment, you invite them. Maybe it's church. Maybe it's an event at church. Maybe it's something to help them to progress and grow in their understanding of who Jesus is. Maybe it's introducing them and inviting them to be a part of other believers. And the reason why that's important, don't miss this. We said you need to introduce, we said that you need to invest, and we said you need to invite. Those 3 are important because if you just introduce and invest, then there's no progression in the relationship. Then all you're doing is you're having fun with one another, but there's no progression in the individual's knowledge or teaching or understanding of Jesus. Then, if you just introduce and invite, there's no investment in the relationship. They're just a number. And if you just invest and invite, there's really no core relationship because you don't even know their name. They're just a number to you. Now, Jesus Christ gave this command. And the disciples went out, and I have to believe the disciples went out kicking and scratching. I'm sure if I was one of the disciples who got the assignment to go north, I'd be like, really, I got to go up to Samaria? All right, I'm going to do it. I'm not happy. But then Jesus has a conversation with his father after this. And I want you to see his conversation with his dad. Because now you understand the context, right? Now, this is why reading the Bible is so cool, because when you understand the context, you really get and understand God and his Son. So take a look at what happens. This is verse 21. At that same time, Jesus was filled with the joy of the Holy Spirit. And he said this, "Oh, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, thank you for hiding these things from those who think themselves wise and clever, and for revealing them to the childlike. Yes, Father, it pleased you to do it this way." God, these knuckleheads, what am I going to do with them? They think they know better than you and I. They think we don't know what we're doing. They think they're going to go and it's going to be disastrous and we don't understand why we need to do this. God, I thank you for making Christianity and eternity childlike and simple. Because they think they're clever and wise. And they're going to find out when they get back to understanding the basics that they have a heavenly Father who loves them enough to send his Son to die not only for them, but for all, because all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Not just Jewish people, not just Gentile people, but Samaritan people too. And when we all understand that we're to go make disciples of individuals that sometimes we don't agree with, we really have a childlike faith. Now, I told you about my neighbor, Fred. A couple weeks after I apologized to Fred, it was September and my son's birthday. By the way, September 29th, he's up there. He's going to be embarrassed, but it's his birthday. It's his 16th birthday. Dear Lord, help us. But it was getting close to his birthday, and all of a sudden there was a knock on the door, and Fred came over. And I opened the door, and he had 2 presents in his hand. And he said, "I brought this for your son." And we said, "Fred, you didn't have to." And he says, "I just think he's the coolest little boy. And I just wanted to say just happy birthday." And we said, come in. He's like, no. I was like, "Come in." So he came in, and he felt uncomfortable, but we welcomed him in our home, and he gave Connor, and Connor opened the gifts. And I'll never forget, it was a John Deere little tractor that he got. It was really cool. A few weeks after that, Christmas comes, knock on the door. He brought Christmas gifts for Connor. He didn't bring me nothing, but that's okay. February comes, and he got word that his mom was diagnosed with cancer. He had shared that with my wife, and so my wife said, "Hey, we're going to pray for her." A few weeks later, he comes and he knocks on the door. I open the door, and Fred is standing there, and he has a book in his hand. And he says, "Terry," he said, "I wonder if you'd do me a favor." And I said, "Fred, what would you like?" He said, "There's this book that's really popular right now. It's called Heaven is for Real." And he said, "I wondered if you would read it with me, and that if we could sit and have coffee, I'd love to discuss it with you." And I said, "Fred, I'd be happy to." We sat, we discussed. Shortly after that, Fred said, "You guys go to church?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Oh, that's right, you're a pastor." I'm like, "Yeah." He said, "Would you mind if I go with you?" We said, "Fred, we'd love to have you." He said, "I'm not sure that your church is ready for me." We said, "Fred, our church would love to welcome you with open arms. If you're willing to sit, listen, learn more about Jesus, we'd love to have you." And he said, "I'd like to do that." Don't miss this point. 6 months prior, that man stood at my door and threw a book at me. 6 months later, he handed me a book, asked me to read the book, and wanted to talk to me about Jesus. All because, rather than treating him like a trophy, I actually said, "God, forgive me. He is your creation. And I should care about his heart. And he doesn't look like me, he doesn't act like me, he doesn't behave like me, but you know what? That doesn't matter. I should care about him because he's my neighbor." I can't tell you the amount of times that we had great discussions about God. We didn't agree all the time. But that's what it means to make a disciple. And I pray today that we would have an army of workers, because the harvest is great, And his command is to go to Samaria. The question is, do you have room for one more friend? Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this message. And God, I just pray, Lord, I think about it, and I think that when we hear these words, we immediately go to what a burden it's going to be for us. And God, that's because we think we're clever and wise. We think we already know what it's going to be like. But God, you know that when we open our heart and when we actually just follow you with a childlike faith, that the blessing is ours. That when we see you move in amazing ways with individuals and do things we never thought possible, we're ecstatic. And so, God, I pray every person here would desire the blessing of God, that be willing to go and make a disciple, and that they see you work in an amazing way. So we love you and we bless you. In Jesus' name, amen. May God bless.